Deep in the shadows of an ancient forest, something watches. A presence older than kingdoms, older than pyramids, older than human memory itself. They move in silence, massive and powerful, yet the world has forgotten what they truly are. What if gorillas are more than just wild creatures? What if Congo. In the mountains, the eastern gorillas became legends even before there were humans to tell legends about them. Massive creatures dwelling in the mist at elevations where the air grows thin and the nights turn cold. They lived according to rhythms we have forgotten how to hear. They woke with the sun and foraged until their bellies were full. They played, grooming each other with patient fingers, strengthening bonds that held their families together across years and generations. They mourned their dead, sitting beside the bodies of the fallen with an expression we recognize because we have worn it ourselves. That look of social rules that would govern their adult lives. Adolescent males faced the eternal challenge of leaving their birth families, striking out alone to find mates and establish new groups, a journey fraught with danger and loneliness, but necessary for the survival of the species. Some would succeed, becoming silverbacks in their own right, leaders of families that would carry their bloodline forward into the unknown future. Others would fail. Time, capable of telling stories, capable of lies. did easy exploration. In the cities and empires of the ancient world, in Rome and Athens, in China and Mesopotamia, philosophers and scholars cataloged the known animals without ever suspecting that in the heart of Africa lived creatures so like themselves it would challenge every assumption about what it meant to be human. The age of exploration changed everything. European sailors ventured down the coast of Africa, driven by greed and curiosity in equal measure, seeking gold and slaves and the glory of discovery. In the 15th and 16th centuries, they began to hear rumors from coastal traders, stories of massive ape men dwelling in the interior forests, creatures that walked upright and possessed terrifying strength. The Europeans dismissed these tales as native superstition, the fantasies of primitive minds, even as they wrote them down in their journals and carried them back to the courts and universities of Europe. The first confirmed European account of gorillas came in 1847, when an American missionary named Thomas Savage encountered skulls and bones in Liberia, unlike anything known to Western science. He sent specimens back to anatomists in Boston, who examined them with growing astonishment. These were not chimpanzees, not orangutans, but something else entirely, something larger and more powerful than any primate previously documented. They named the species gorilla, borrowing from ancient Greek accounts of wild, hairy people encountered by explorers, mixing mythology with science in a way that would characterize human understanding of gorillas for the next century. The age of scientific establishment reacted with a mixture of fascination and revulsion. Here was a creature that seemed to bridge the gap between animal and human, that possessed hands and faces eerily similar to our own, that moved and behaved in ways that triggered an uncanny recognition deep in the human psyche. Some scientists hailed the gorilla as proof of evolution, evidence of our place in the natural world. Others rejected this implication violently, insisting that the similarities were superficial, that the gorillas were mere beasts without souls, without minds, without any of the qualities that made humans special and separate and chosen by God. What followed was a period of slaughter masquerading as science. Expeditions were mounted to capture or kill gorillas, to bring back specimens from museums and zoos, to collect the raw data that would allow natural historians to describe and classify these creatures. Hunters ventured into the forests with guns and guides, and they shot gorillas indiscriminately, killing silverbacks to get to infants, destroying entire families to secure a single specimen. They justified it as necessary for the advancement of knowledge, but it was murder nonetheless, murder driven by curiosity and pride and the unquestioned assumption that human desires justified any amount of suffering inflicted on other species. The bodies were stuffed and mounted in museums across Europe and America, frozen in aggressive poses, mouths open in silent roars, glass eyes staring at nothing. Visitors came to gawk at them, to marvel at their size and ferocity, never imagining the living creatures these had been, the families they had belonged to, the gentle moments that had filled their days. The taxidermied gorillas became symbols, warnings, representations of everything wild and dangerous that civilization must conquer. They were trophies in a war that the gorillas had never agreed to fight. Back in the forests, the surviving gorillas retreated deeper into the mountains, avoiding the paths where the gun-carrying strangers walked. They learned to fear the sound of human voices, the smell of human sweat. They became more elusive, more cautious, their natural trust eroded by repeated betrayals. But the forests were shrinking, and there was nowhere left to hide. The 20th century arrived with promises of progress, and for gorillas, progress meant intensified exploitation. The colonial powers that carved up Africa among themselves saw the continent's wildlife as resources to be managed or obstacles to be removed. Gorilla habitat was cleared for plantations and settlements, forests fellowed to make way for coffee and rubber and palm oil. The Industrial Revolution's appetite was insatiable, and it consumed everything in its path, trees and soil and the creatures that depended on them. Yet it was also in the 20th century that the first seeds of understanding were planted. A few individuals began to look at gorillas not as monsters or specimens, but as subjects worthy of study and respect. Carl Akeley, despite being a hunter himself, became fascinated by the gorillas he encountered in the Virunga Mountains, and his advocacy helped establish what would become Volcanoes National Park, one of the first protected areas specifically created for gorilla conservation. He died in 1926 and was buried in the mountains he had fought to protect, his grave a small monument to complicated redemption. But protection on paper meant little in reality. Poaching continued, driven by demand from zoos and collectors willing to pay enormous sums for live gorillas. The process of capturing infants was barbaric beyond description. Hunters would track gorilla families through the forest, then open fire on the adults protecting the young. Silverbacks died defending their families, mothers died shielding their infants, and in the end, the traumatized babies were torn from the corpses of their parents and transported in crates to distant countries to live behind bars in concrete cages, performing for crowds who never wondered about the price that had been paid. One such infant was captured in French Cameroon in the 1930s, a tiny gorilla who would be named Snowflake for the genetic mutation that turned his fur pure white. He was taken to Barcelona Zoo, where he would spend the next 40 years in captivity, becoming famous, beloved even, a gentle giant who painted pictures and posed for photographs. Visitors adored him, never thinking about the family he had lost, the forest he would never see again, the life that had been stolen from him so they could spend 5 minutes staring through the glass. The middle of the century brought war to Africa, struggles for independence that pitted colonized peoples against their European masters. The forests became battlegrounds, and gorillas were caught in conflicts they could not comprehend. Soldiers moved through the mountains, laying mines that would kill indiscriminately for decades to come. The violence of human politics spilled into the last refuges of the wild, and the gorillas, trapped between warring factions, continued to die. It was during this period of chaos that a few remarkable individuals began to change how the world saw gorillas. In 1959, George Schaller became the first scientist to conduct a long-term field study of mountain gorillas in their natural habitat. He spent months in the Virunga Mountains, observing gorilla families with patience and respect, documenting their behavior without interference. What he discovered contradicted everything the popular imagination believed about these creatures. They were not aggressive monsters, but gentle giants, vegetarians who spent their days eating, playing, and caring for their young. They were capable of tenderness, humor, grief, and complex social relationships. They were, in other words, far more like humans than humans had been willing to admit. Scheller's work laid the foundation for what would become the most famous gorilla research project of all time. In 1967, a young American woman named Dian Fossey established a research camp in the Virungas, and her life would become inseparably intertwined with the gorillas she studied. Fossey approached the gorillas with a devotion that bordered on obsession, spending hours sitting motionless while they grew accustomed to her presence, imitating their vocalizations, eating their food, gradually being accepted into their world in a way no human had been before. She gave them names, these gorillas, names that would become familiar to millions through her writing and through the film that would later be made about her life. There was Digit, a young male who would become her favorite, playful and curious, approaching her with a trust that broke her heart. There was Uncle Bert, the silverback, who led one of the groups she studied most intensively, powerful and protective, tolerating her presence with what seemed like benevolent understanding. There was Coco and Pucker. There was Beethoven and Effie. There was an entire cast of individuals with personalities and stories and lives that mattered. Fossey documented everything, filling journals with observations that revealed the depth and complexity of gorilla society. She watched infants being born and celebrated with the mothers, their tiny faces wrinkled and perfect. She watched juveniles learning to navigate the intricate hierarchy of their groups, testing boundaries, forming alliances. She watched silverbacks leading their families with a combination of strength and gentleness that commanded respect without requiring cruelty. And she watched them die, killed by poachers, by disease, by the encroachment of human activity that left them nowhere to go. Her crusade against poaching became legendary and controversial. She organized anti-poaching patrols, destroyed traps, confronted hunters with a fury that terrified them. She made powerful enemies, local officials who profited from wildlife trafficking, businessmen who wanted the mountains cleared for development. She didn't care. The gorillas were everything to her, more important than her own safety, more important than her reputation, more important than the scientific detachment her colleagues insisted was necessary. On December 26, 1985, someone entered Dian Fossey's cabin and killed her with a machete, splitting her skull with the same weapon used to kill gorillas. Her murder was never conclusively solved, though theories abounded, suspects named and accusations made. She was buried in the cemetery she had created for the gorillas who had died during her years in the mountains, her grave next to Digits, united in death with the creatures she had loved more than her own species. On her tombstone, a simple epitaph: "No one loved gorillas more." Her death was a tragedy, but her work survived her. The Dian Fossey Gorilla Fund continued her research and conservation efforts, and her book, Gorillas in the Mist, brought the reality of mountain gorillas to a global audience. The 1988 film adaptation, starring Sigourney Weaver, introduced millions more to these creatures and to the woman who had devoted her life to protecting them. Public consciousness shifted, slowly but measurably. Gorillas were no longer monsters, but victims, no longer threats, but treasures in need of protection. Yet even as awareness grew, the threats multiplied. The late 20th century brought new horrors to the gorilla's world. Civil war erupted in Rwanda in 1994, a genocide that killed hundreds of thousands of people and sent millions fleeing across borders into the forests where the gorillas lived. Refugee camps sprang up on the edges of protected areas, desperate people cutting trees for firewood and shelter, hunting bushmeat to survive. The gorillas, already endangered, found their habitat further fragmented, their populations isolated in shrinking islands of forest surrounded by human need and violence. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, conflict has raged for decades, militias and armed groups fighting for control of land and resources in a war that never seems to end. The forests became hiding places for soldiers, and gorillas became collateral damage, shot for meat to feed troops, killed by landmines, dying of stress-related illnesses as their world dissolved into chaos. Rangers trying to protect them were murdered at their posts, conservationists kidnapped or killed, and still the violence continued, a grinding attrition that consumed everything. The commercial bushmeat trade exploded in the 1990s and 2000s, driven by logging operations that built roads deep into previously inaccessible forests. Hunters followed the roads, killing everything they could, gorillas included, smoking the meat and selling it in urban markets where wealthy customers considered it a delicacy. An adult gorilla could be worth hundreds of dollars dead, butchered and sold piece by piece, a calculation that erased millions of years of evolution into a simple monetary value. The same hands that could grasp tools, that could express affection, that could cradle infants, were severed and sold as trophies, macabre souvenirs for people who collected such things. Disease added another dimension to the catastrophe. Ebola swept through gorilla populations in the early 2000s, killing thousands. Entire groups found dead, their bodies rotting in the forest that had been their home. The virus didn't discriminate, didn't care about conservation status or scientific value. It simply killed efficiently and terrifyingly, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. Researchers who had spent years studying particular gorillas arrived to find them gone, wiped out in weeks, leaving only corpses and silence. Yet amid all this darkness, there were moments of light, small victories that offered hope even when hope seemed irrational. Conservation programs expanded, international funding increased, local communities were gradually brought into the protection efforts. Ecotourism developed in Rwanda, Uganda, and the Democratic Republic of Congo, allowing people to trek into the mountains and spend an hour in the presence of habituated gorilla groups. Visitors paid thousands of dollars for the privilege, money that supported conservation and provided economic incentives for protecting the gorillas rather than killing them. Those encounters changed people. There is something about sitting 3 feet from a silverback, looking into eyes that look back with interest and intelligence that breaks through the barriers we construct between ourselves and other species. Visitors described it as spiritual, transformative, a moment of connection that transcended language and culture. They saw mothers cradling infants with expressions of love indistinguishable from human tenderness. They watched juveniles playing with the unconscious joy of children everywhere. They witnessed the quiet dignity of silverbacks who could kill with ease but chose patience instead. And they witnessed the quiet dignity of silverbacks who could kill with ease but chose patience instead. They watched them die, killed by poachers, by disease, by the encroachment of human activity that left them nowhere to go. Her crusade against poaching became legendary and controversial. She organized anti-poaching patrols, destroyed traps, confronted hunters with a fury that terrified them. She made powerful enemies, local officials who profited from wildlife trafficking, businessmen who wanted the mountains cleared for development. She didn't care. The gorillas were everything to her, more important than her own safety, more important than her reputation, more important than the scientific detachment her colleagues insisted was necessary. On December 26, 1985, someone entered Dian Fossey's cabin and killed her with a machete, splitting her skull with the same weapon used to kill gorillas. Her murder was never conclusively solved, though theories abounded, suspects named and accusations made. She was buried in the cemetery she had created for the gorillas who had died during her years in the mountains, her grave next to Digits, united in death with the creatures she had loved more than her own species. On her tombstone, a simple epitaph: "No one loved gorillas more." Her death was a tragedy, but her work survived her. The Dian Fossey Gorilla Fund continued her research and conservation efforts, and her book, Gorillas in the Mist, brought the reality of mountain gorillas to a global audience. The 1988 film adaptation, starring Sigourney Weaver, introduced millions more to these creatures and to the woman who had devoted her life to protecting them. Public consciousness shifted, slowly but measurably. Gorillas were no longer monsters, but victims, no longer threats, but treasures in need of protection. Yet even as awareness grew, the threats multiplied. The late 20th century brought new horrors to the gorillas' world. Civil war erupted in Rwanda in 1994, a genocide that killed hundreds of thousands of people and sent millions fleeing across borders into the forests where the gorillas lived. Refugee camps sprang up on the edges of protected areas, desperate people cutting trees for firewood and shelter, hunting bushmeat to survive. The gorillas, already endangered, found their habitat Yet even King Kong carried within it a message, however muddled, about humanity's relationship with nature. The beast was brought to civilization in chains, exploited for profit, driven mad by captivity and confusion. His rampage was the consequence of human greed, and his death was a tragedy of our own making. "'Twas beauty killed the beast," the final line reminds us, but the real killer was the impulse to capture and control, to drag the wild into our world and expect it to survive the transformation. Other depictions were more sympathetic. Gorillas appeared in children's books and animated films, portrayed as gentle protectors, misunderstood giants with hearts of gold. These representations, while sometimes anthropomorphized to the point of inaccuracy, helped create a public image of gorillas as worthy of protection, creatures to be loved rather than feared. A generation grew up caring about gorillas they had never seen, advocating for their protection, donating to conservation causes. The 21st century dawned with gorillas perched on the knife edge of extinction. The mountain gorilla population had dropped to fewer than 650 individuals, two isolated populations clinging to existence in the Virunga Massif and Bwindi impenetrable forest. Western lowland gorillas, while more numerous, were declining rapidly due to hunting and disease. Cross-river gorillas numbered only a few hundred, scattered across the border region of Nigeria and Cameroon, their habitat fragmented into patches too small to sustain viable populations long-term. Eastern lowland gorillas had suffered catastrophic losses due to the ongoing conflict in the Democratic Republic of Congo, their numbers dropping by perhaps 80% in just 2 decades. The world was finally paying attention, but attention alone could not save them. What was needed was action, sustained and coordinated, expensive and difficult. Governments had to be pressured to enforce protection laws. Poaching networks had to be dismantled. Local communities had to be given alternatives to hunting and land clearing. Habitat corridors had to be preserved or restored to connect isolated populations. Disease surveillance programs had to be established. The problems were enormous, interconnected, daunting in their complexity. And yet, miraculously, there were successes. The mountain gorilla population began to increase, slowly at first, then more steadily, surpassing 1,000 individuals by 2018. It remains the only great ape whose population is growing rather than declining, a testament to the effectiveness of intensive conservation efforts. Rangers risk their lives daily to protect them, patrolling the forests, removing snares, monitoring health. Veterinarians provide medical care when gorillas are injured or sick, treating wounds from poachers' traps, intervening in difficult births. Habituation programs continue, allowing tourism while minimizing stress on the gorillas. Organizations around the world support this work with funding and expertise, a network of scientists, conservationists, activists, and ordinary people who refuse to accept a world without gorillas. They fight battles in courtrooms and legislatures. They work with communities on the ground. They educate children who will inherit the responsibility of stewardship. It is exhausting, often heartbreaking work, victories measured in single births, in individual gorillas who survived when they might have died, in hectares of forest preserved against constant pressure to convert it to human use. Consider the story of Nadoxi, a mountain gorilla born in 2007 whose mother was killed by an armed militia group in Virunga National Park Rangers found her clinging to her mother's dead body, a tiny orphan who should not have survived. They brought her to a sanctuary where she was raised by human caretakers, bonding especially with a ranger named Andre Balma, who held her through the nights when she cried for the mother who would never return. Nadoxi grew up in the sanctuary, never able to be released into the wild because she had not learned the skills necessary to survive from her mother and family group. She lived for 14 years, and when she died in 2021, she died in Andre's arms, the man who had saved her, holding her as her life slipped away. He described it as a privilege, this final intimacy with a creature who had trusted him completely. There was Kamina, a silverback in windy, impenetrable forest, who lost half his family when a tree fell during a storm, crushing his mate and two of his offspring. Rangers found him sitting beside the bodies, unwilling to leave them, his massive form shaking with what could only be described as sobs. They gave him time to grieve before gently encouraging him to rejoin the surviving members of his group, and in the weeks and months that followed, they watched him take on the care of the orphaned juveniles, displaying a devotion that reminded everyone that love is not a uniquely human emotion. There was Ihirwe, a young mountain gorilla born in 2009, who showed signs of unusual intelligence even as an infant. Researchers documented her learning to use tools, fashioning sticks to measure water depth before attempting to cross streams, a behavior previously unknown in mountain gorillas. She taught this skill to younger members of her group, evidence of cultural transmission, proof that gorillas create and share knowledge across generations. Every gorilla has a story, a life that matters, and the tragedy is that we will never know most of those stories. They are born and live and die in the forest, their dramas and triumphs witnessed only by their families, remembered only in the collective knowledge of their groups until those groups themselves disappear. We know only the tiny fraction we have observed, a glimpse into a world that is vast and complex and slipping away despite our belated efforts to preserve it. The question that haunts the conservation movement is whether we're doing enough, whether our efforts amount to anything more than a temporary delay of the inevitable. Gorillas need intact forests, large territories, freedom from human interference. But the human population continues to grow. Poverty continues to drive exploitation of natural resources. Climate change adds new unpredictable pressures. The forests are shrinking, fragmented into islands that may be too small to sustain gorilla populations long term. Even the success of mountain gorilla conservation might be illusory, a small population preserved at enormous expense while the larger crisis goes unaddressed. There are those who argue we should focus on saving habitat, that protecting forests will automatically protect the species that depend on them. Others insist that direct intervention is necessary, that without intensive management, gorillas will go extinct within decades, regardless of habitat protection. Still others question whether conservation in the traditional sense is even possible anymore, whether we have so altered the world that the only gorillas who will survive are those in managed reserves, essentially outdoor zoos, their wildness preserved in name only, while human managers control every aspect of their existence. These are not abstract philosophical questions, but urgent practical dilemmas that play out in funding decisions and policy debates. Every dollar spent on conservation is a dollar that is not spent on human needs, and in regions where people struggle to survive, the argument that we should prioritize gorillas over human welfare is a hard sell. Yet the counterargument is equally compelling. Gorillas are indicators of forest health, and forests provide services that humans depend on: water purification, climate regulation, soil preservation. Saving gorillas means saving ecosystems, and saving ecosystems ultimately means saving ourselves. The COVID-19 pandemic added another layer of complexity to an already difficult situation. Tourism stopped overnight, cutting off the primary funding source for many gorilla conservation programs. Rangers went unpaid, monitoring decreased, poaching increased. The gorillas themselves faced a new threat, the possibility of catching the virus from humans, their respiratory systems ill-equipped to handle a pathogen to which they had no immunity. Conservation programs scrambled to adapt, implementing strict protocols, masking, distance requirements, trying to protect both the gorillas and the rangers whose livelihoods depended on them. Yet even in crisis, there were moments that reminded people why the struggle mattered. Photos circulated online showing rangers in Virunga National Park caring for orphaned gorillas, young females named Nadaksi and Nadeze standing upright next to their caretakers, striking human-like poses that delighted millions. The images went viral, generating attention and donations, reminding the world that these creatures existed and needed help. In the midst of a global pandemic that killed millions of humans, people still found space in their hearts to care about gorillas. The question of why gorillas matter is one that each person must answer for themselves. From a purely utilitarian perspective, their extinction would have minimal direct impact on human life. They are not a food source for most people, not an economic resource beyond tourism, not a critical link in ecosystems in the way that, say, insects or soil microbes are. The forests would continue to function without them, the sun would continue to rise, and human civilization would carry on largely unchanged. But to reduce the value of a species to its utility is to miss the point entirely. Gorillas matter because they are our relatives, our cousins in the most literal biological sense, sharing ancestors who lived just millions of years ago, an eye blink in evolutionary time. They matter because they are conscious, feeling beings capable of joy and suffering, because they love their children and mourn their dead, because they have inner lives as real and significant to them as ours are to us. They matter because they are beautiful, because they are irreplaceable, because they represent 4 million years of evolutionary history, a lineage that has survived ice ages and volcanic eruptions and countless other catastrophes only to face potential extinction at the hands of the one species that should know better. They matter because they are a mirror held up to humanity, reflecting back both our capacity for destruction and our capacity for compassion. In how we treat gorillas, we reveal who we are as a species, whether we are capable of restraint, of humility, of recognizing value in beings unlike ourselves. Every gorilla we save is a vote for the possibility that humans can change, can learn from our mistakes, can choose to be stewards rather than conquerors. Every gorilla we allow to go extinct is a confirmation of our worst tendencies, our selfishness, our short-sightedness, our willingness to sacrifice anything and everything for short-term gain. Look at them one more time, these gentle giants, these forest philosophers who want nothing from us except to be left alone. See them as they are, not as characters in our stories, but as subjects of their own lives, beings with preferences and personalities, with complex social relationships and emotional depths. Watch a mother gorilla nursing her infant, her eyes soft with an expression that transcends species, that speaks to something universal about the bond between parent and child. Watch a silverback sitting in contemplation, his gaze distant, and wonder what thoughts move through that mind, what memories, what awareness of the past and future. Imagine a world without them, forests that still stand but feel empty, ecosystems intact but missing the keystone that held them together. Imagine future generations asking why we let them disappear, what possible justification we could offer for standing by while such magnificent creatures vanished forever. Imagine trying to explain that we knew what was happening, knew what needed to be done, but couldn't quite bring ourselves to prioritize their survival over our convenience, our profit, our endless appetite for more. Or imagine a different future, One where gorillas not only survive but thrive, where populations recover and expand, where forests are protected and expanded, where humans learn to live alongside these creatures with mutual respect and minimal conflict. Imagine children 100 years from now trekking into the mountains to see mountain gorillas, just as children do today, the tradition continuing unbroken, the connection between species maintained across generations. Imagine what it would say about us if we could accomplish that, if we could be the generation that pulled them back from the brink, that chose preservation over exploitation, that decided that some things matter more than money. The choice is ours, and the window for making it is closing. Gorillas have survived for 4 million years, but they cannot survive us, not without our active intervention, not without a fundamental shift in how we value other species and the ecosystems they inhabit. We are the problem, and we must be the solution, or there will be no solution at all. In the end, the story of gorillas is a story about us, about what we're willing to fight for, about whether we can overcome our own destructive impulses in time to save not just gorillas, but the countless other species facing extinction in the Anthropocene. It is a test of our character as a species, a question with profound moral implications. The gorillas cannot speak for themselves, cannot advocate for their own survival, cannot vote or donate or organize campaigns. They can only be what they are, trusting that we will find in ourselves the wisdom and compassion necessary to protect them. The forest breathes in silence, just as it has for millions of years, mist curling between trees that may outlive us all. Somewhere in that green cathedral, a gorilla family sleeps, the Silverback's bulk providing shelter for his children, his mate resting nearby, her infant's heartbeat synchronizing with her own. They do not know how close they came to extinction, do not understand the political battles and fundraising campaigns and scientific studies that have kept them alive. They simply exist, living the only lives they know how to live, asking nothing of us except the chance to continue. And in that simple request lies everything that matters, everything that makes us human in the best sense of that word, the capacity to care for beings beyond ourselves, to sacrifice our immediate interests for values that transcend utility. The gorillas are counting on us, whether they know it or not, and the world is watching to see what we will do, whether we will rise to the challenge or let them slip away into extinction, into memory, into the long roll call of species we failed to save. The silence of the forest waits for our answer, patient and eternal, the same silence that witnessed the first gorillas millions of years ago, the same silence that may one day mark their absence. What will we choose? What will we tell the future about who we were and what we valued? The question echoes through the trees, unanswered, urgent, demanding a response we may not be ready to give but must give nonetheless. Because to fail now is to fail forever, to close a door that can never be reopened, to lose something precious and irreplaceable and achingly, heartbreakingly beautiful. The mist rises, the morning comes, and the gorillas awake to another day, another chance, another moment of existence in a world that grows stranger and more dangerous with each passing year. They survived the ice ages and the volcanic eruptions. They survived the rise of humanity itself. But this final test may be too much, too overwhelming, too utterly dependent on the choices of a species that has proven itself capable of transcendent compassion and unimaginable cruelty. We are writing the ending to this story right now, with every choice we make, every dollar we spend or withhold, every moment we choose to care or choose to look away. The pen is in our hands, the page is still blank enough to be written on, and the gorillas, unknowing and trusting and impossibly vulnerable, wait to see what words we will use, what future we will create for them, what legacy we will leave to the generations who will judge us by how we answered this most fundamental of questions. Will we be the species that saved them, or the species that let them die? The answer is coming, one way or another, and when it arrives, when the final accounting is made and history passes its judgment, we will only have ourselves to blame or to thank for the world our choices created. The forest breathes, the mist curls, and somewhere in the green silence, a gorilla infant opens its eyes for the first time, looking out to a world that is both beautiful and broken, full of danger and full of possibility, hanging in the balance between salvation and extinction, between hope and despair, between the worst of what we are and the best of what we might yet become. This is their story, and it is our story, and it is not finished yet, but the final chapters are being written in real time, and we are all authors whether we accept that responsibility or not. The gorillas cannot write their own ending, cannot save themselves, cannot do anything but be what they have always been, magnificent and gentle and utterly dependent on our mercy, on our conscience, on our ability to see in them something worth saving, something that reflects the light we hope still exists within ourselves. Remember them, these forest ghosts, these gentle giants, these living mirrors that show us who we are and who we might become. Remember them in the forests where they still cling to existence, fighting for every day, every birth, every small victory against the forces arrayed against them. Remember them in the museums where their stuffed bodies stand frozen in poses that bear no resemblance to the lives they lived. Remember them in the stories we tell and the choices we make and the future we create or destroy with our action or inaction. And when the silence comes, as it may, as it threatens to, let us remember that we were warned, that we knew, that we had every opportunity to change course and every reason to do so, and that what happened next was entirely our decision, our burden to carry, our crime or our triumph, our shame or our glory, written in the survival or extinction of creatures who never asked for anything except to be left in peace, to live out their ancient birthright in forests that were theirs long before we arrived and should be theirs long after we are gone. The echo fades, reality shifts, and somewhere between what was and what will be, the gorillas wait, hoping without knowing hope, trusting without understanding trust, existing in the only way they know how, while we, their only chance for survival, decide whether that existence will continue or end, whether the forest will remain full or fall silent, whether this story will end with redemption or with loss, with life or with the terrible, final, irreversible absence that we call extinction. The choice is ours. The time is now, and the gorillas, patient and powerless, wait for our answer in the fading light of a world that grows darker with each species we lose, each forest we destroy, each moment we choose convenience over conscience, profit over preservation, ourselves over everything else that shares this planet we claim to love but treat with such casual cruelty. This is echoed reality, the truth we create with our choices, the world we leave behind, the legacy written in survival and extinction, in the presence or absence of gorillas in forests that may stand but ring hollow without them, monuments to everything we could have saved but chose not to, everything we lost because we could not find in ourselves the courage, the compassion, the simple basic decency to protect creatures who never harmed us, who only wanted what every living thing wants, to exist, to endure, to pass life forward to the next generation in an unbroken chain stretching back to the beginning and forward to an end we pray never comes. They are still here, barely, clinging to existence in shrinking forests, protected by people who refuse to give up, who believe against all evidence that humanity can change, can learn, can become worthy of sharing this planet with creatures as magnificent as gorillas. That belief is being tested now, in real time, and the outcome is uncertain, the future unwritten, the ending still unknown. All we know is this: what we choose now will echo through time, will be remembered or forgotten along with everything else we accomplish or fail to accomplish, and that in the end we will be judged not by what we said, but by what we did, not by our intentions, but by our results, not by our potential, but by our actual choices when it mattered most. The forest waits. The gorillas wait, and the echo of what we might have been fades into the silence of what we are, leaving only the question that has no answer except the one we give it, in this moment, in this choice, in this final chance to prove that we are capable of being better than our history suggests, wiser than our actions indicate, worthy of the power we wield and the responsibility that comes with it. The silence deepens, the mist thickens, and in the heart of the forest where gorillas still draw breath, the future hangs suspended between hope and extinction, between the best of humanity and the worst, between the world we inherit and the world we leave behind, empty or full, alive or dead, a testament to what we valued or a monument to what we destroyed. This is their story. This is our story. This is the story of what we do next, and the world, watching and waiting, wonders which story we will choose to tell. Gorillas are not just shadows of the jungle. They are echoes of a time long before us, a history written in silence, strength, and survival, one that the world is only beginning to understand. But this is not the end of the story. It's only the beginning of what history tried to hide. If you're ready to question reality, to uncover forgotten truths, and to hear stories that still echo through time, subscribe to Echoed Reality, because some truths don't disappear, they wait to be heard.